Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second set of conferences on the positive synergies for gifted people. Our topic is the consequences of non-identification or just identifying and labeling. I'm Alberto Padicio, member of the Enol Association from the beginning. I'm proud to be able to introduce Dr. Agustín Cabezudo. He's a medical psychiatrist, one of the pioneers in Asturias, studying mental health, with over 50 years experience. He's head of clinical unit in the University Hospital of Asturias, collaborates as a lecturer in the University of Asturias and member of our association, which is a great honor for us. He's president of the Asturian Association of Psychiatry, and he's come today to talk to us about the consequences of non-identifying gifted people, understanding what is to be gifted in the current society from the point of view of a psychiatrist. It's an honor to know him personally. He keeps working as hard as ever, never-ending work. Whenever you want, the floor is yours and very welcome. Thank you for sharing your time with us. Thank you very much. I'm Agustín Cabezudo, psychiatrist. I've been working for over 50 years, and what I'm going to talk to you is based on my professional experience. I would also like to congratulate Dolores Palacios and her family for having founded this Enol Association that helps so much gifted people. I also had the chance to meet Enol, a person with very high capacities, a great person with high sensitivity, and that we unfortunately lost in an accident. I'm going to talk about the connection between psychiatry and gifted people. Giftedness is not a condition, so psychiatrists wouldn't have very much to deal with it or to say. But the contrary to giftedness, the disability, learning capacity, low capacities are considered a disorder. Why giftedness isn't? Well, because if we had a statistical criteria of the average, it would be as much considered a condition, high capacity as low capacity, but we're talking about functionality. Giftedness is someone who has developed to a certain degree some virtues or some qualities that their brain has. A person who runs really fast doesn't suffer a condition, whereas a person who can't run would suffer from something, maybe a muscular or bone, heart, some kind of condition. So running too fast is not a condition, and giftedness isn't either. But giftedness doesn't mean only high, especially gifted talent, intellectually talented, but we're also talking about sensitiveness, sensibility, very sensible people, very intelligent, of course. They perceive a lot. They're very emotional people. And this can be very good or it can cause big problems because giftedness can be good or bad. Well, it depends. Because as energy, well, it depends on how we're using it. Nuclear energy can be fantastic and be very good if we're using it for a power station that is supplying electricity for hospitals in a whole country, or it can be bad if we're using it to create a nuclear bomb. Being very intelligent can be very good or not so good if we're using it on our favor and others, for the favor of others, but we're using it against ourselves or against others. It's terrible. So we have to take it with a pinch of salt. After this first element, something that we are very much connected to, psychiatrists and other professionals, doctors, psychologists, is that we find it difficult to identify the gifted person. And why is so? Because sometimes we confuse it with other issues, with other disorders. It's very common to confuse a gifted person with a hyperactivity disorder, because the gifted person doesn't seem to pay enough attention, because sometimes they're bored. Whatever the teacher is saying is too well known for them. They just go back into their world. They don't pay attention. Sometimes they show hyperactivity because they notice many other stimulus. They react faster. They call their attention. They're more active. Sometimes we can also confuse giftedness with a bipolar disorder, because this gifted person sometimes feels very strongly fluctuating emotions. Happiness is more intense, sadness is more intense, there are more changes, there are higher variations, and maybe we could also be leading to that confusion. We could also confuse with impulsivity disorder, because the gifted person perceives the stimulus much better and responds much faster to them with a bigger variation, and there could be also a confusion. And we could also misdiagnose and think that instead of a gifted person, the person in front of us has a personality disorder. Development disorders, Asperger, for example, or maybe for a person that is very much into their world, or limit personality disorders, a little hyperactive people with change of moods. And sometimes as psychiatrists, we can dangerously mistake the diagnosis. And instead of diagnosing a giftedness, we can place them a label that will determine their lives and can cause them many, many problems. So it's very important that we don't get it wrong, that we can identify correctly the gifted person. Sometimes this gifted person, for whatever problems that their situation and its connotations may have, will probably have some disorders. And what we see first, in the first place, are those disorders: anxiety, depression, food disorder, eating disorders, behavior disorders. So the mistake from the psychiatrist or the professional would be to focus only in this first image and not to see what's underlying, that is the real origin of all of this. So it's very important that professionals, we are trained to identify, diagnose the gifted person and don't confuse it with other conditions or disorders. And there's one other element that I'd like to highlight, and probably is the most important one, because gifted people have often problems to adapt. And why? Well, whoever is different feels it a bit more difficult to integrate. Whether you're too tall, too short, if you don't adapt to the fashion standards, all of these people have a problem to adapt. And we can reflect this problem in two circumstances. Sometimes there's an external pressure, some envy, some jealousness, rejection, bullying even, that can cause a trauma to this gifted person. But some other times it's even the person itself, the gifted person, when seeing themselves different and not knowing why, not understanding what's going on, they also feel shyer, they want to isolate themselves, stay in their own world. And sometimes, whether it's because of this external pressure or because they don't know what's going on, what's happening, because they know they're different, but they don't know why, their personal and emotional situation can become really complex. When a gifted person has an adaptation problem, we can see emotional unbalance issues, anxiety, as we said, depression, stress, behavior disorders, eating disorders. So it's important that psychiatrists, if we see someone like this that shows these problems, that we shouldn't stay at the surface. We should go deep down. Let's see what's causing those problems, because then otherwise we will never solve the problem. It's like smoke. If we block the smoke from relieving its pressure from one side, but we don't switch off the fire, we don't put it off, we won't solve the problem. There will still be smoke. So we will have to go to the basics. We have to go down to the bottom. That's very important. Come on, this is the most important thing. What do we have to do? The most important thing is to try to identify. And we have to know what is a gifted person, because being able to identify them, we're going to avoid diagnosis confusion. We're going to avoid labeling them with disorders or conditions that they don't have, or confusing the consequences of adaptation problems with the situation itself, with the giftedness situation itself. The main problem is also good. It's essential to share it with the family, teachers, friends, relatives, and for them to be able to understand this person. But it's also very important for the person itself, because they can understand why they're different. They're not better, they're not worse, they're just different. They have some qualities and some characteristics that are being used properly. They can be very positive. If not, they can cause problems, misunderstanding, jealousy, envy, personal development. And knowing this person, their own characteristics and the qualities, knowing themselves is what they're going to give them that minimum of safety, confidence, self-esteem, and that's basic, because in life we are aiming at making these people feel good. All of us want to do that, to feel good with ourselves, with what we do, with others, to feel integrated, part of it, part of their life, to be calm. And we get to this point once we know, we understand how we are, what are our virtues, our disadvantages, and make the most of one and the other. That's why it's so important that experts and professionals, we keep this all in mind. We keep giftedness in mind, so we don't make mistakes, so we don't misdiagnose it. They're very complex, they're very dangerous, because once you set a label on a person, it's very difficult to remove, and you're going to make their life more difficult. We need to help them understand how they are in the emotional side. In the case of Enol, for example, a gifted person, fantastic person. We also made the mistake. He was diagnosed with all sorts of conditions or disorders until we finally discovered that he was a gifted person. So my message to you is that we shouldn't confuse this giftedness with other diagnoses, with other disorders or conditions, and not to confuse it with other problems and circumstances that usually derive from their adaptation problem. I hope this brief presentation will be useful to you to understand and identify and help them and their beloved ones to live better. I wish you a very good day, and I'm here available for you. Thank you.